Welcome again, everyone. We will be starting our event now. Before we begin our event, we will acknowledge the land that Ryerson University is built on. Up until today, Indigenous people are facing injustices in Toronto and across Canada. Many people are taking part in the actions that fight these injustices and may not be able to take part in today's event because of this work. We miss their presence, but are very thankful for their efforts for change. Toronto is in a dish with one spoon territory. This one spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Welcome, everyone, to the Zoom Year or Gap Year event. This event is being hosted by the Faculty of Arts and Arlas to assist and show you the support available in making the best decision for yourself in choosing between taking a gap year or starting or continuing with the online fall semester. We want to ensure you are presented with many details to support you in your decision-making process. To introduce myself, my name is Giselle Gerardo. My pronouns are she and her. I'm in my fourth and final year, hopefully, of politics and governance, and the president at Ryerson Liberal Arts Society, also known as RLAS. Okay, so just a few housekeeping notes. Please don't hesitate to show your faces through the camera function. We love seeing your faces. A lot of the panelists don't want to just talk to themselves. Please keep yourself on mute so we can clearly hear all of our guests and panelists. This meeting will also be recorded and uploaded on the Faculty of Arts website shortly. Okay, and then lastly, we will be having a Q&A portion after all the panel discussions and presentations. For the first 10 minutes, we'll be opening the chat to everyone to introduce themselves, ask questions to be answered on later. And once the chat has closed, you can continue on sending any of your questions to Melissa. Now I'll be passing it off to our lovely Dean of Arts, Dr. Pamela Sugerman, for opening remarks.
Thanks, Giselle. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this event. I hope everyone is enjoying the summer. I say that, but quite seriously, it's difficult to talk about enjoying the summer given the social, the political, the economic, not to mention the health issues that we are all facing today. So I'm actually aiming for some coping strategies and would like to help you with that as well, to cope with the decisions, the circumstances that we are all facing at present. I'm sure that students, most, if not most of you here today are students. I'm sure that you've been weighing the pros and cons of learning virtually or taking a gap year, as Giselle pointed out. If I put on my administrator's hat, I would say, oh, don't take a gap year, continue to register, take all of the courses you would normally. As an academic leader, I think my responsibility is to make sure that you make a decision that you're comfortable with and one that is informed. And that's the reason we decided to, with our last, host this event today, to make sure that you can make some informed decisions about what to do in the fall. And so we are very fortunate to have with us a number of speakers. First of all, Diana Breacher is going to talk to you about how to make informed, educated decisions, deliberate decisions. And, Diana has lots of very excellent advice. We're also going to be joined by some panelists. I know that they'll be introduced more formally, or they'll be introducing themselves in a few minutes, but we have some students, Ryerson students with us today, and some Ryerson professors as well, who are going to share their perspectives. And we are also joined by some of our colleagues in student financial assistance and in student awards. And they'll be speaking about some of the financial support that's available to students in the fall and some of the material implications of taking a gap year. And then before handing the screen over, I do want to acknowledge the leadership of Alan Sears, who's a chair of the sociology department, and Joselle Gerardo, whom you just met, and most of you probably already know, president of the Ryerson Liberal Arts Society. And Alan and Giselle have been working tirelessly to make events such as this possible, to support you students as you approach this very unique semester. And they will be leading the event today. So I'll hand things over to you, Alan and Giselle, and thank you.
Thanks, Pam. It's really an honor to be here. And we recognize part of the reason that we're having this meeting today, and what we hope to, this is part of a series, is that we realize this is a really important time to be talking to each other about the challenges of the moment that we're all facing. And one of the big things that people are deciding is whether they should be going to university under these circumstances, whether this is the best time, given remote delivery and so on, to be taking up studies or continuing studies. So we thought, rather than pretending this wasn't happening, it was important to be engaging in this discussion with people. I myself took off between my third year and my fourth year, and it's probably part of the reason that I graduated and went on. So everyone has to make their own decision. We're not here because we assume there is a right decision for everybody, but that we can learn how to make these decisions as well as possibly for ourselves. My name is Alan Sears. I'm the chair of the sociology department. And it's my pleasure to introduce the first person who's going to be talking to us about this, Diana Breacher, who I've had the pleasure of working with closely over many years. Diana is someone who has worked for many years in the counseling center at Ryerson University. She's co-developer of the wonderful Thriving in Action program that is concentrated on teaching students how to develop the capacities to live well at school and beyond, and is now has been a professor for a number of courses and is going to be teaching the very exciting version of SSH 102, which is a learning strategies course that will be available to you. And Diana is going to be talking about ways to make decisions in a time like this. So Diana, over to you.
Thank you, Alan. I'm just going to share my screen and I'll get started. Here we are. Okay. So I was asked to give you some ideas about how to make big decisions in principle. And the question really is, should I attend Ryerson in fall 2020? We don't know what the winter is going to look like. So we're really looking at this first semester. And so many of you are probably familiar with the pros and cons method, but I want to add a couple of layers to it to get you thinking about a methodology of making some important choices. So many people are familiar with the pros and cons method, and so I just made up what I think might be relevant pros and cons. So I'm assuming for many of you that Ryerson was your first choice when you were first accepted, and so that hasn't really changed. It's still Ryerson, it's a different delivery methodology. I'll explain the numbers in a moment. There's something about education and momentum, that you've got started on something and perhaps want to keep going while you still have that momentum. Attending university during a pandemic makes a lot of sense in terms of structure. There's going to be structure to your days that otherwise perhaps would not be as structured in terms of classes, synchronous or asynchronous, group work, etc. And intellectual stimulation, which I think is so important for so many of us, and a sense of community. Now, the reason why I added these numbers is, this is another layer to pros and cons, is on a scale of 0 to 5, how important is each of these in terms of what you value and is important to you? So I'm pretending that education momentum is perhaps a little bit less important than the fact that Ryerson was your first choice, but community is more important than that. So you would put these numbers together and ultimately add them up. And then in terms of looking at cons, what I imagine the cons are is remote learning. And I know certainly remote teaching is not exactly something I'm was initially excited about, but I've been learning so much about doing it that I'm actually becoming more excited about it. But there's a learning curve that everyone has to engage in. There's going to be less extracurricular activities, and none of them on campus, but perhaps quite a few of them online. And then the idea that it's not what you expected or hoped for. So I've also assigned some numbers on the minus scale. And if we actually add them up, I've kind of stacked the deck perhaps as 21 for pro and -7 for con. But that is one way for you to think about not only what are the values that I put for pro and con in making a decision, but how much more important are some things than others. And then to kind of take this to the next level is an exercise in kind of imagining the future. Now, human beings are really interesting in this way. We have these fantasies of what the future is going to hold, but we don't always have all the details associated with it. So when people are faced with making a decision, we often imagine the worst case scenario. And so in this case, I would encourage you to imagine that worst case, but then assign a percentage point of how likely that worst case will actually happen. And then you move over to the best case scenario and really imagine the best possible thing that could happen and how likely is that going to be. And then you kind of come towards the middle and say, given both, what is the most likely case scenario? And how much of a percentage point would you give to that? And often what happens is we ignore the best case and we imagine the worst case. And this is about bringing everything in so that you make a fulsome decision. And then given the most likely case, what is your action plan? So in a very short nugget, that is the methodology of making tough decisions. I would add one other thing. Consulting with people whose opinion you really respect can be very helpful. So that could be family members or peers, people who can help you weigh some of these things. If you're really not sure, if you really feel like you're on the fence, getting input from others can also be very helpful. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now and hand the mic back.
Thanks so much, Diana. Really appreciate that. Giselle, I see that you have a follow-up question that you'd like to ask Diana.
Hi, Diana. Thank you for showing us the great presentation. How can we consider other types of cons, such as financial burden or family obligations? How can we put that in the scale to make sure that we have the best decision in that?
Great question. I think you just put them in and then you give them a value about how important they are. So a -5 would be, this is really important for me to consider. This is a real drawback to making this choice, and it may weigh heavier than some of the pros or not. So I can't know anyone's individual circumstances, so I just kind of made up a couple of examples, but anything that's important to you that's part of your consideration should be included in this chart. You could have 20 items in it, there's no limit, but you want to kind of distill it down to, on the face of it, which is more important to me, these pros or those cons.
Thank you for clarifying that, Diana. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and now we'll be moving on to other panelists to introduce Shazida Ghafoor. She is a current economics student. She's a former lead coordinator with the Center for Women and Trans People with a very extensive background in equity and inclusion, and is currently exploring a more creative way to integrate creative industries, business economics, and sustainability. Hi, Shazida.
Hey, everyone.
As a student yourself, from a student's perspective, what are some advantages and drawbacks for taking time off during this time?
Okay, so I guess this is kind of like a very personal question to a lot of people. I'm just going to go off of my own experience with taking time off school. I took a year off in my second year of studies because I felt really suffocated by school. I was experiencing a lot of anxiety about my grades, about classes and homework structure, my career options. And I had taken a year off after my mental health was just rapidly deteriorating. I think that in considering the pros and cons, you really have to personalize it. And right now, COVID, I guess, is a very uncertain time. And I took a year off of school kind of because I needed it. My mental health was really deteriorating. I was really struggling to keep up with what was happening. And I wasn't able to find a balance. And taking a year off is disregarded a lot by, you know, anyone who's not in school, I guess, because of the amount of uncertainty that comes with it. Like, what are you going to do? What about your job prospects? There's a million questions that come to mind when you consider taking a year off, and they all stem from uncertainty. But I think that if COVID has taught us absolutely anything, it's that we need to become a little bit more comfortable with a healthy amount of uncertainty. Balancing life, friends, and family and your finances is hard. It's hard in your 20s. It can take a toll on you if you're not able to get the support that you need. And, you know, taking a year off and taking time to navigate yourself is very important. Taking a year off to get the foundation for all of those dynamics to begin, and getting to know yourself and focusing on your well-being is, I think, one of the most important parts of the coming of age of finishing university. So, you know, getting to know your strengths, your weaknesses, your passions, what you're not passionate about, your likes and your dislikes. If you don't know that and you don't feel sure about that in university, now would be a great time to explore it. And Giselle, when she introduced me, had mentioned a little bit about integrating business and economics and sustainability and creativity. For those of you who don't know, you probably don't know this, but I do work in fashion as well. And I think looking for a way to integrate my passion for fashion, oh my God, it was so corny, my passions for fashion, as well as business and economics and sustainability, has really taken off since I've taken a year off, since I've looked at my passions. So don't be afraid of the uncertainty, because right now we live in a very uncertain time economically, in terms of, you know, the climate. Everything is very uncertain right now, and taking a step back to become more self-assured and to assess your own weaknesses, your own powers, I think is going to go a long way right now and in the future. That's it.
Thanks, Shazita. That was wonderful, and really appreciate you sharing your wisdom. We're going to go through a few different panelists giving a first answer, and then we're going to come back to the whole panel with a couple of general questions. The next panelist is going to give a slightly different perspective on this, not necessarily disagreeing, but from a different point of view in the university, which is Amy Peng, who's an associate professor of economics. She's the 2020 President's Teaching Award recipient for innovative curriculum, large classroom teaching, and experiential learning. And we're going to ask Amy to come into this saying, what would you say, both as a professor here and as an economist, to a student who's considering taking this fall off from university? Amy, over to you.
Well, thank you, Alan, for the nice introduction. For Shazita, she's my student. Well, I always say when I meet all of the students the first time, that university is a place where you find yourself. I think what Shazita said is very, very important. Everybody has to find your own place when you're, you know, taking 4 or 5 years of your post-secondary education. Here, I would like to make a few suggestions. One is to think about economic factor. Why not? I'm an economist. Second of all, to think about it from a professor perspective, because I was thinking learning is a partnership between students and instructors. I wanted to, well, we gather a lot of feedback from the students from the winter term, and I would like to let all the students know some of the options or some of the things the professor has been working on throughout the summer, okay? For the economic factors, as you may all hear, the economic impact of COVID-19 is substantial. So you may heard about it. It's now called a great shutdown recession. So where we never experienced in the past. You may remember the 2003 SARS. In SARS, we lost $1 billion, 1 billion, close to $1 billion. In this recession, based on the federal government recent forecast, the projected federal deficit is over $340 billion. So there's no comparison. No one has experienced this, not policymakers, not economists. So how long is going to take us to recover? We don't really know. So people are projecting long-term, maybe over 10 years. People are also projecting a short recovery of 2 to 3 years. So in terms of employment loss, you may also heard about this a lot. So recently the news have covered this a lot as well. So in between February and April, so overall in Canada, we lost 3 million jobs in total. There's good news of a bouncing back of about 290,000 employment in May, but 80% of those employment increases are happening in Quebec, not in Ontario. So in May, actually, Ontario continued to lose employment. So what is the overall employment losses in Ontario? Just put a few numbers here to give you some perspective. So in March, we lost 403,000 jobs. And then April, 689,000 jobs. That's over 1 million already, okay? May is slowed down, but there's still 65,000 employment losses. So, and also there are 55% of the people who currently employed are underutilized. That means they're not working the hours they used to work before, okay? So many of you are, if you are considering taking some time off, one thing I think many students would do is to find a job, right? So working in a sector, for example, it's a sector you want to try for CETA, maybe fashion industry. But is there actually opportunity there right now? So that's a question you have to ask yourself, okay? So, so for many of you are thinking about in the fall, you know, I may not want to return to school. I want to work for a while, but looking at employment outlook is not really great. We all know this as well. So if you wanted to looking for other options, for example, exploring volunteering, start your own business, being a social influencer, that's the buzzword now, that's actually a good opportunity or a good time to try it out. But in terms of service industry, I know many students used to working at or have been working at, they are the biggest losses in terms of employment. However, if you're closer to graduate, there's something more for you to think about. There may not be immediate opportunities, right? For many of the students who may be in the 3rd and 4th year and thinking, I'm graduating soon, what I'm gonna do? So this may be worth it for you to take some time off to think about what your future career path looking like, okay? Taking a course or two that you may not thinking about taking it before, getting a certificate, maybe you never think about getting it before. This is also a good opportunity to think otherwise. So if you're not return to school and study full time, well, then what is time gonna locate it for? So if you're concerned about economic outcomes, the return to your education and future employment paths, there's actually other things you must self-reflect and choose something that works out for you. So that's from the economic aspect, okay? Now let's talk a little bit about remote learning. I think I see Diana put it in a cons there. So students' fears about remote learning. Is there lost in terms of learning content? As we've seen when we went remotely in an emergency situation in the winter, I review or read through Reddit, I see student rant on it and seeing how course went it. Not great, right? Not clear expectations. Some of the course lost structure. Students concerned about, you know, communication, accommodation, accessibility, all the issues that comes up. But I can rest assured many of the students, instructors or professors like me and Alan, we have been working really hard to reshape the fall courses. We were thinking about focus more on learning outcomes and designing more learning activities. So instead of traditional 3-hour lecture format, we know this is not possible. So me myself cannot watch somebody Zoom online for 3 hours. You know, I would turn off the camera and go somewhere else. So we know it has to be learning outcome focused. We know it has to be learning activity based. So it's going to be very different. You're not going to see one midterm, one final course anymore. Instead, you may see actually weekly ongoing learning activities. So it's going to be structured, deliver clear expectations. And as I was sitting on different teaching committees, I see professor working on podcast series to give students better accessibility. I see professor working on short videos to demonstrate a difficult or important concept. I see our economists designing experiments to have students to try it out. I see many more applied components that be designed and added to the course. So I know we're working hard on it, and I also know that this is also the first time for many of us as well. So we are actually as vulnerable as students as well. But I want to continue collaborate with students, make sure this is a good learning path for everyone. So for the student who return in the fall, I want you to have a wonderful learning semester. So there's no loss in content. Let's go, Alan.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Amy. And Shosal, you were going to introduce Rudra next. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Alan. It's a really great perspective from an economist and a professor. A lot of us don't know what professors are doing right now, preparing for the fall. It's great to hear, great reassurance. Now let's move on to Rudra. Rudra has supported students at Ryerson's Tri-Mentoring program for 8 years and has successfully advocated for the creation of new scholarships and programming that better support students. So Rudra, as someone who has close relationship with a lot of students and as a student yourself, what would you say to a student who is considering taking a year off from school this fall? Why consider taking a time off? Why consider going through the online semester?
Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So as Giselle mentioned, I work in Ryerson's Tri-Mentoring program. What we do there is we support students transition in and out of the institution and also support students while they're with us on their journey at Ryerson. So for first year students, we will match you with an upper year student in the same program of study as you. Once we have mentors available, but definitely within the same faculty. And then for graduating students, we can match you with a professional in the industry you want to get into after graduation to support your transition out of the university. So in addition to working at the Tri-Mentoring program, I'm also a mature student in the Arts and Contemporary Studies program. Pre-COVID, I had 5 courses left to finish my degree, and then COVID happened, and luckily I'm still here. But I've definitely struggled with my decision as to whether to continue with schooling or not. I know the support for students is there, not just because I work in one of these support programs, but I see behind the scenes like how hard my colleagues in the academic support offices and the academic accommodation offices and the professors are working in order to create the best possible learning experience for students. That hasn't completely swayed me though, because I've already failed 2 courses with online delivery in subject matter areas that I have extensive experience with. However, that was a few years ago because I've been doing my degree since 2012. So I've been doing this a while. I only do 2 courses a semester, not just because I worked full-time at Ryerson, but because I also identify as a student with multiple learning differences. I'm also married with 2 small children, 9 and 5 years old. Well, not so small, the 9-year-old plus attitude. But anyway, so like life responsibilities, all the things that Dr. Breacher was talking about, very helpful. Because in terms of the educational momentum, I've been doing this for a while. So I know I'm gonna stick with it to finish. However, life responsibilities sometimes get in the way, right? And life challenges. So thank you, Shazida, for sharing your challenges with mental health. About 3 years ago, my mother passed away from incurable cancer. So I also had some challenges with my mental health and didn't step away because of fear, being afraid of employment prospects like Dr. Peng talked about. And honestly, I got freaked out all over again when Dr. Peng was talking. But also recognizing that I am very fortunate and privileged in the space that I occupy, right? So I know there's lots of hiring freezes and job losses all over the place. So I empathize with students having to choose and make that decision because there is a cost and school can be quite expensive. Tri-mentoring, however, has lots of scholarships for incoming first-year students, for first-generation students. One of these scholarships that we were able to advocate and lobby the university to create was scholarships for mature students specifically. And I think we are one of the only institutions, if not the only institution in Ontario that offers scholarships for mature students. So Ryerson, in my experience, like with the different perspectives I have, has so many people that genuinely care about students' well-being and students having the most positive experience that they can. And oftentimes people like Avila, who you may see, go far above and beyond what is required of them to make sure that that happens, right? It is a very personal decision you're going to be making. I struggle sometimes with asking for help, right? But I think that is one of the things that people in support offices right now are working really hard to try and make as accessible as possible. Because sometimes with a virtual environment, it's easy to just search whatever you have a question about, tack on Ryerson at the end, and it'll come up on Google. But sometimes it's easier when you are physically present on campus to stumble into an office and ask, where do I need to go to get help with this, right? And there's people there that will, again, like walk you to where you need to go, or answer any questions that you may have, or help you find that answer until you feel comfortable moving forward. So there are pros and cons. Unfortunately, I don't have any answers for you. I only have questions. So, but I will say that from the support office side, like we are working really hard in terms of making sure that you feel connected to this community, that you know that you belong here and you deserve to be here, and that we will welcome you to the Ryerson community, and just reimagining how we make community and how we form community, so that it's not just physically, but that we imagine that in an accessible way with an online community, which is what we're going to be dealing with for the next little bit. So there will be opportunities for you to make friends and connect with other students and upper year students and get involved. It's just for you to figure out if now is the right time for you. And for me, I was actually, before this, I was dead set on taking a break, but I also recognize that I have until November to drop my courses with no consequence. So I actually have lots of time to figure out if this is really going to work for me with this go around. And I think for me, the fear of the failing 2 classes previously with online delivery is really the biggest barrier that's holding me back right now. It's the uncertainty, the fear of the unknown. So, like I said, I don't have any answers for you, but hopefully I've helped a little bit in terms of you asking yourself the questions that are important to you and what matters to you. So,
Thanks so much, Shazita, Amy, and Rudra. That was really powerful. I really appreciated the honest reflection and just kind of summarizing a few of the themes that I heard. The idea that sometimes personal challenges mean that it's best to pull back to give ourselves the space we need. At the same time, moving away from school can create other opportunities for self-realization. But we also need to think about the economic factors. Will we be able to do what we want to do if we move away from school at this moment? Or are the economic factors making it rather difficult to find the kind of employment and so on that we might need to feel good about ourselves during this year and to feel we're actually moving forward in our lives? I really appreciate Rudra and Amy mentioning that at the level of teaching and at the level of support services, we're all doing our best, but we're experimenting, we're learning, but there is a lot of work going on to try to figure out how to create some of the community and some of the learning that happens normally at university, rather than just improvising on the moment as we had to do in the last term. People are spending the summer doing a lot of work to try to prepare the support and so on. One of the things, so I'm just going to shift, and there will be a chance for some question and answer at the end, but I just want to shift now because one of the factors that Amy talked about was the question of economics. And one of the things that students face is the whole question of what financial assistance is available. We're really fortunate at Ryerson. I've taught at more than one university, and I really think it's a distinction of Ryerson that the people who work in student financial assistance and student awards really want to help students access the resources they need. That's what they see their job as. And we're fortunate to have with us today Bianca Marichaux and Matthew Haddad, who I believe are both graduates from Faculty of Arts programs, to talk a little bit about what's available in terms of student financial assistance, how that may have been shifted in the current circumstances, and how to access the help you need to continue going to university should that be your choice. So Bianca, I believe, is going to go first, and then Matthew, and so over to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alan, and welcome everybody. As Alan mentioned, my name is Bianca Marichaux, and I'm Coordinator of Student Financial Assistance here at Ryerson University. So I wanted to give you a little bit of perspective about the different financial options if you choose to take a gap year versus if you're going to come back into studies, just so you have all the tools that you need to make an informed decision. So first of all, I want to get started with what's going on with student loans, because there has been some really fascinating developments happening over at the ministry that perhaps you're aware of, perhaps you're not, but I will let you know a little bit about those. So back in March of this year, the federal and provincial governments came together to announce a joint moratorium on OSAP student loans that will support OSAP borrowers amidst COVID-19. And moratorium is just a really fancy word for a suspension of an activity. And in this case, it is a temporary suspension of your student loan repayment and a little bit of a shift to the interest that accrues on it. So in terms of the temporary suspension of your student loan repayment, from March to September 30th, 2020, student loan repayments have been suspended. So that means any student who is currently repaying their student loans does not have to, and any student who is already pre-registered for pre-authorized debit through the National Student Loan Service Center, which is your lender of your student loans, was automatically stopped. And in terms of the interest-free period, from March 2020 through to September 30th, 2020, there is no interest being charged on OSAP borrowers' student loans from both the federal and the provincial government. So those are two really great developments that have helped many students. And right now, we're not too sure if that's going to extend. There's talks on potentially extending that moratorium, but for now, we know that repayments of student loans are set to begin again as of October this year. Next slide, please. Thank you. In terms of the two directions of what you can do, whether you're taking time away from school or returning to studies, I've broken it up into two columns. So I'll start with taking time away from school. So if you were with us in the past academic year, the past fall, winter semesters, and now you're deciding that perhaps you're not going to be joining us again in September, there will be some changes to your OSAP student loans that I really want you to be aware of so you can make an informed decision. So your OSAP student loans will begin to collect interest once that moratorium is over. So as of October 2020, you will see that your OSAP student loans are collecting the interest that they would have started accruing back in April. You'll receive that notice from the government about repaying your student loans through your National Student Loan Service Center portal, which you should already have active as an OSAP borrower because you would have initialized it when you first started getting your loans. But if you haven't accessed that portal in a long time, please do, because that is the National's main method of communication with you. And as I mentioned before, the National is your lender. And so it's very important that you're staying up to date with the information that they provide. If you are on the other side and you are thinking of returning to studies, it's very important that you are choosing one of two options to keep your loans out of repayment and in interest-free status. So if you're coming back to studies, whether full-time or part-time, you have two options to keep your loans interest-free and out of repayment. You can apply for OSAP again if you wish to be considered for funding for the upcoming academic year, or you will apply for interest-free status if you do not want OSAP funding for the upcoming academic year, but you wish to keep your loans out of repayment. So again, you're only choosing one of those options. The reason is that both lead to the same outcome, which is keeping your loans interest-free and out of repayment. The difference is really just if you want to be considered for OSAP funding, you will of course apply for OSAP. And if you do not wish to be considered for OSAP funding, but you want to keep your loans interest-free and out of repayment, then you will apply for interest-free status. And you'll notice that I have hyperlinks all throughout this presentation. When this presentation is over, you folks will be getting a copy of the slide deck, and you will also be getting an email that has the follow-up to all the links that I'm posting. So don't worry, you will have all the tools that you need to make that informed decision. Next slide, please. In terms of entering repayment, so perhaps you're listening right now and you are just dead set on the fact that you do not want to do a Zoom year and you will be taking that gap year. So in terms of options and opportunities for you when you start to enter repayment as of October, the National does have a really great program known as the Repayment Assistance Program, RAP for short. And the RAP program is designed to help borrowers that have difficulty repaying their student loans. So it's a completely online application, again, available through your National Student Loan Service Center portal. So if you have not visited that in a long time, please do. And if you have not yet registered for one, please do so. The great thing about the Repayment Assistance Program is that if students are eligible, they may be receiving a reduced monthly payment or no monthly payment, and it goes in 6-month increments. And what happens during that time is that the government will pay the interest that would typically accrue on your loan. And if you're approved, as I mentioned, re-enrollment is not automatic, so you have to reapply every 6 months, but it is a really great opportunity to help you curb some of the interest that would be accruing on your account. And it's great if you get fully approved because you are not penalized if you choose to make payments during the time you are on repayment assistance. And it's actually encouraged because anything that you pay goes directly to your principal, meaning that you pay off your student loans faster. If this is a program that is kind of resonating with you and you think you may be interested in it, we always suggest applying in late September or early October if you are set to enter repayment at the end of October. As I mentioned, it is a very quick online application. It's about less than 10 minutes and it takes 2 business days to find out if you're eligible. And the National does do a lot of really great engagement and outreach for students. They recently created 2 new fantastic videos on repayment of government student loans that goes over the repayment assistance program, the pros and cons. So if you are interested in that, I have included the hyperlink for you to take a look. Next slide, please. I do want to also highlight some of the different COVID-19 supports that have been put in place from both the provincial government and the federal government, and also talk a little bit more about some changes to the upcoming year's OSAP program in response to COVID. So in terms of the COVID-19 supports that provincially and federally have been implemented, just gonna go over them at a high level. It's not something that student financial assistance at Ryerson administers, comes directly from those respective governments, but I do want to highlight some of them that seem to be most relevant to our students here. So provincially, there's a number of opportunities. There is the Ontario Emergency Assistance Program, which provides about $733 a month if you are a single person in need of help paying for food or shelter. And you get additional emergency assistance if you have children. And this is greatly offered up to 48 days of support depending on your specific situation. If you are a student who is receiving Ontario Works, OW, or on the Ontario Disability Support Program, ODSP, there is an additional $100 available for single individuals and an additional $200 for families. So if you are on OW or ODSP, please contact your caseworker so they can help you get that extra funding. There's also a really great website that the provincial government put out called COVID-19 Supports for People. And it provides a detailed overview of all of the financial and non-financial supports that are available for Ontario residents specifically. So you'll find different mental health supports, different financial supports, supports for your children and youth, emergency shelters and other support services, as well as wellness and addiction support. Next slide, please. In terms of federal support, which is likely the bulk of what many of our students are accessing, there's three main programs, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, CERB, Canada Emergency Student Benefit, CESB, and the recently announced Canada Student Service Grant, CSSG. So I'll go over all three of them at a high level. We'll start on the left side. So the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, CERB, is temporary income support for those who have stopped working due to COVID-19. And it provides $500 a week up to 24 weeks. So it was recently extended. It was actually set to end next month, but they extended it to October 3rd. And I have included the hyperlink to the CERB website for a full list of the eligibility criteria, as well as the application details. There's also the Canada Emergency Student Benefit, CESB, which was announced back in May. And this is specific for students. So it's temporary income support for post-secondary students who otherwise do not qualify for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit or for employment insurance, EI for short. So this is open to students who are either full-time or part-time, recent graduates from December 2019 onward. Unfortunately, it is not open to international students, but the CESB provides $1,250 per month or $2,000 per month for students with dependents or those with a disability. And it is available from May to August 2020. And I've included the link to the CESB website for a full list of eligibility criteria as well as application details. And then finally, on the right-hand side of your screen is the Canada Student Service Grant, CSSG, recently announced. This is again specific to students, and it provides qualified post-secondary students and recent graduates with volunteer opportunities while supporting not-for-profit organizations that are addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. So in order to be eligible for the CSSG, you need to be a Canadian citizen, permanent resident, refugee, First Nations, Métis, or Inuit, and you have to be aged 30 years or younger. You also need to be enrolled in part-time or full-time studies in a recognized post-secondary program in either this current spring-summer semester or the upcoming fall 2020 semester, or you could have completed your post-secondary degree in December 2019 or later. Similarly to the CERB, unfortunately, the Canada Student Service Grant is not open to international students. From a financial perspective, CSSG offers up to $5,000 of grant funding being contributed directly to a student's educational costs in the fall. And you're able to see the full breakdown of eligibility criteria, application details, and the different thresholds to get up to the maximum of $5,000 on the CSSG website, which I have hyperlinked. Next slide, please. And then finally, there's some really great COVID-19 federal supports coming specifically to the OSAP program. And this might actually help you weigh your decision if you want to take that Zoom year or the gap year. So the OSAP program is actually seeing some really great funding being pumped into it, but only for this upcoming academic year because it is specific in response to COVID-19. So some of the great supports that we're seeing is that federal grants are being doubled, which is something that has never happened before. So this means that students are able to be considered for double the amount of federal grant funding that they would in the past. And grant funding is funding that you do not have to pay back. Similarly, there is also the doubling of the Canada Student Grant for students with disabilities. So previously it was $2,000, and now students with disabilities are eligible for up to $4,000 of grant funding. Again, funding that they do not have to pay back. There's also an increase to the weekly loan amount. It used to be $210 a week. It has now increased to $350, which is a great jump. That means that you are, again, able to access potentially more OSAP funding to be used towards your education. One of the biggest changes, and we've never seen this before, is waiving student and spousal contribution on the federal side of your OSAP student loans. So what that means is that the typical OSAP formula takes into account the amount of spousal or student contribution that the ministry deems is appropriate for a student or a spouse to contribute to the education. And for the upcoming academic year, that's waived. So there's absolutely no expectation that students or spouses are contributing to the students' post-secondary journey, which is huge. So one more thing, there's also the interest-free moratorium on student loans. So I really hope that understanding that these are only in place for this academic year really helps you to make a decision on if that Zoom year or gap year is the route that you want to take. We will likely not be seeing a doubling of grants and an increase to weekly student loans anytime soon, especially with the clawbacks that we had in this past academic year to OSAP. So if you are maybe even just considering just seeing how much OSAP funding you might be eligible for before making the decision if you want to come back to school or not, please submit an application and see what you're able to get, because that might really help you determine if taking a year off or continuing with studies, even if it's at a reduced course load, is the decision for you. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to highlight that I know I went through a lot of information, especially about the COVID-19 supports. This is actually all on our brand spanking new student financial assistance website. So ryerson.ca/student-financial-assistance. It's a beautiful new website. It's on the screen. It looks great. And everything that I said is there for you. So there's a high-level summary of all the different financial aid programs, as well as the changes that I just went over to the OSAP program for the upcoming academic year. Next slide, please. I'm going to pass it over to Matt, who will go over awards and scholarships.
Thank you, Bianca. Thank you, Faculty of Arts, for having me. My name is Matthew Haddad. I am the manager of student awards and scholarships. The impacts to awards and scholarships is quite minimal in comparison in relation to what Bianca described for student financial assistance. In terms of academic year awards, general eligibility for awards and scholarships during the academic year is based on your term-by-term enrollment activity. So if you do take time away from school or take a gap year, you'll still have access to these opportunities upon your return. The biggest impact would be, sorry, if you don't mind going back. Thank you. The biggest impact will be on your renewable entrance scholarships. Your eligibility for renewal of your entrance scholarship will be compromised if you take a gap year. In general, the renewability of your scholarship is based on maintaining a 3.67 CGPA or higher at the end of the most recent winter semester. And you have to be enrolled in 4 or more courses for both the upcoming fall and winter terms. Entrance scholarships are administered across 4 consecutive calendar years. Therefore, any gaps will result in the forfeit of your scholarship for that year and will not extend the timeline of your scholarship into a 5th year or 6th year. Next slide, please. In terms of bursary assistance, such as the Ryerson Emergency Bursary, this is available every academic year. So even if you do take a gap year, this would also be available the next upcoming year. However, this is a support and assistance that would be available to you if you do happen to return in a virtual environment. It is intended to provide students with financial assistance as a result of sudden or unexpected circumstances or emergencies for which they could not have planned. It's not meant to address any funding shortfalls, so you really do want to tap into assistance via OSAP, any out-of-province funding. You also want to ensure that you want to try to maintain some savings or employment income. And of course, we would always take into consideration individualized situations. That's why the Ryerson Emergency Bursary is there. It's meant to take into account your specific situation and determine if funding is available to you. It's funding that you do not have to pay back. So it's a bursary assistance that can be provided at any value, depending on the uniqueness or circumstances surrounding your situation. One other resource that I do want to mention that's not really mentioned here, and it's not something that Bianca and or I necessarily have any ownership over, but it's the Career Boost program. This is a student staff program that's available to all students on campus, so long as you're enrolled full-time for the upcoming academic year. And I can say that this is a program that's really fantastic. It provides you with a lot of work experience. It gives you the ability to get working in a virtual environment as well, because there are a lot of departments around campus that are offering positions in which you'll be working in a virtual environment. And not to sound self-serving, but even our office, the awards office, is looking for 2 students to apply for awards management system analysis positions. So if you're interested, by all means apply. But yes, that's another program that I did want to mention as well. Next slide, please. And then finally, you can find our contact information. So to contact us at the awards office, it's just at awards@ryerson.ca. And to reach student financial assistance, you can contact them via the service hub. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Bianca, for showing us the different financial options to support us during the gap year or online semester. There are many options to explore now. We appreciate all these new information. There are tons that I didn't even know until now. So thank you for that. I'm not a representative of Career Boost, but I am working as a Career Boost at the Faculty of Law, and there are many opportunities for you to work even remotely, so you can go get that, slight of money adjustment to help you out during the fall. Unfortunately, we are also nearing the end of the event. We're only able to answer a few questions. Wehowever, please do not worry if your question didn't get addressed. We are developing an FAQs document to send out to all registrants. Now we'll be moving on to the Q&A portion of this event very quickly and open it up to questions from the audience submitted to Melissa. And I'll be passing it off to Melissa now.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. There are a lot of questions, great questions. So we're going to try to get to a couple of them without taking up too much more of your time. One question submitted by Jessica McDonald is, what are the downsides to being a part-time student, and does it make enrolling for classes or changing back to full-time difficult for the future?
Thank you, Jessica, for the question. I was wondering if Rudra can take a stab at this question.
There's no downsides to being a part-time student. In fact, I often encourage students to not limit themselves to 4 years to complete their degree. Ryerson is a place where there are captains of industry, political leaders, business leaders, all types of industry professionals that you want to get connected with. So if you take advantage of Matthew's suggestion of finding an on-campus job, it can actually really help you in terms of networking, meeting people that are working in the industry that you want to get into. Dr. Peng is an economist, right? Her network is extensive. And then do well in her class. I'm sure she'll hook you up in terms of introducing you to some of the people that she knows. And that's how it can go. So if you are a part-time student and you extend your length of time in that environment, it can really help you in terms of making a diverse set of connections with that. Also, classes are a lot more manageable. So I said I started my degree in 2012. And I failed those 2 online courses. The majority of my grades are A's and B's, right? So those are the only two F's I have on my transcript. I don't really like to use grades as a measure of learning because it's just a moment in time. But when you are a part-time student, you have a lot more time, I find personally, to focus on deep learning and mastery of knowledge, and also work a little bit because textbooks sometimes can be expensive. So yeah, I wouldn't say there's a downside to part-time.
Thank you so much Rudra. Our next question is from Jocelyn Rambashan. Jocelyn had two questions. The first one being, if I were to take a year off, how will that affect my being able to complete my degree? And she also had a question regarding tuition for virtual classes. That question was raised a couple of times. Unfortunately, we're not able to answer it here. It's not within the purview of the Faculty of Arts, but we certainly understand it's a concern for many students, and so we'll be bringing that back to the administration. Giselle, if you want to direct that question.
Yes, thank you, Melissa. Just to restate the question, if I were to take a year off, how will that affect my being able to complete my degree? And hopefully Amy Pang can answer this question.
Well, take a year off. So sometimes when I started with my third year class, Shazida knows this. So I asked them a series of questions. A lot of the models and the applied works are built upon the courses they have taken before. The answers has always been from the students, well, the summer has passed, we forgot about it. So that's a popular answer. So back to the empirical economic literature, which I'm familiar with. The literature usually see, actually there's research have done on this, to see that the economic return or the returns on a delayed learning is actually negative. The economic return means we only talk about in money terms, okay? So for many students who take a year off, it has an impact on learning content that's being lost during the year. And the other thing I want to say is, it's not always negative. You also have to look at the positive side, which is, as we know, technology, knowledge, informations are updated daily. So the information you're learning today, not necessarily equal to the information or the knowledge you're getting for the year next, right? So to say that, I always say to the students, the university is the place for learning, is to learn how to learn. Your learning is a lifelong learning process. But if you actually understand, for example, problem-solving skills, for example, the algorithm that you have learned throughout some of your other courses, that can be applied widely. So it's really a case-by-case basis. So during I would not suggest you taking a year off and not doing any learning at all. So like I said, there's many other options for you. You can thinking about, say, if this is a year or if this is a term you want to get a certificate somewhere, this may be a great time to do so. But don't sit around at home and doing nothing. So I've been seeing two of my boys playing computer games nonstop, and they're 9 to 12. So I'm not asking a lot out of them. But again, that's really not a year off. So if you're taking a year off and not being active, then it's not worth it. So take a year off and learn something that you think you're passionate about to find your place in the world, to learn how to learn. Then I encourage you to think about other options.
I actually wanted to add to that really quick. I definitely agree with what Dr. Peng has said about taking a year off, not really being off of your responsibilities and your own personal and academic growth. I know a lot of postgraduates right now who are done school and have nothing else to do but do certifications, so it's a very unique situation for postgrads. And I think that if you were looking to take time off of school, you should also be leveraging it in that way. Take advantage of taking that time to maybe do some of the things that you were interested in and that you didn't have time for. Well, now you might have time for it if you choose to take time off of school. So, coding classes online, learning more about programming or learning more about that sustainable initiative that you wanted to do, or integrating your interest with your education and aligning your values, I think is a really valuable way to spend time away from an academic learning environment or being at school.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. It feels like this was too short for some of the richness, and I got to see some of the questions that we didn't get a chance to fully answer today. And it's just the nature of this kind of rich discussion. I think it was clear to everybody that this is not a one-size-fits-all decision. And that's one of the things I think we wanted to emphasize, is that you shouldn't assume that there's a right or a wrong answer to the question about what's the best path for me in the year ahead. Everyone has to work this out for themselves and access the kind of resources that are going to help with this kind of decision. I really appreciate Amy saying, and I just wanted to add, and Rudra, that we're working on campus to try to develop the resources that will assist you in learning and in building community in this year, recognizing that there are obstacles to doing so. One of those resources is a course that I'm just going to do a very brief pitch for, called SSH 102, which is learning strategies that being taught by Diana, who presented earlier today, co-taught with Dina Schaefer, which will offer some of the benefits of a gap year in a Zoom year, in that it focuses on developing your skills at thriving as an undergrad and in life. And that will start actually before the term and continue into the term, fingers crossed, to help you through the term. I want to thank the participants in this really rich discussion and thank everybody who attended. There will be follow-up. Everyone who attended will get email that will include the slides and some FAQs, some frequently asked questions, that will offer some path for following up some of the questions that we didn't get a chance to get to today. I also want to say it was really great to work with Chaussel, and I always find it wonderful working with the Ryerson Liberal Arts Society, and it's great to see the Faculty of Arts working with the Liberal Arts Society so much these days. I want to thank the organizers behind the scenes, Melissa, but lots of other people. And also remember that your program administrator in whatever program you're studying at is often a wonderful resource as you're trying to make decisions about what the implications will be for your courses. I certainly know when I talk to students in sociology that they say that Elizabeth, who's the program administrator in our department, is a lifeline for them. So feel free to share your doubts, your questions, and so on with us. And the FAQ and slides that will be sent out after this event will show you some of the ways to reach out for us, to different people at the university, to continue answering the questions, because we realized we didn't get to everything that people raised today. But thanks so much to the panel for a really rich discussion, and to the organizers for making this happen. And it was wonderful to see everybody. And thank you so much. And Giselle, did you want to just say a little goodbye and thanks?
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for all the panelists here. It was great having you. It was great seeing everyone. A lot of new faces, but a lot of faces that I've been seeing before, but haven't seen in a while. But it's great to see everyone here. I hope this helped you out in making a decision, whether to take a gap year, to take a few courses, or to continue on online semester. But either way, we are here for you. Ryerson Liberal Arts Society is a student-led society that will always be here for you. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any ideas how we can connect to students. We've been trying to figure it out. We've dealt with Discord, Facebook, Instagram. There's so many platforms. We're trying it all out for you. So please don't hesitate to contact us on social media or email me. My email is in the chat below. I just want to say thank you, everyone. I hope all the best for you. Stay safe, wear a mask. And this is going to be a great fall semester. I look forward to seeing everyone thrive during the semester. I wish you all success. Thank you.